It's me, Maria Rose, pole dancer extraordinaire. Whee! Woo! And we're here today to talk about beans. Beans! Woo! Alright everyone, I'm feeling very silly today. I'm sure a lot of you are feeling the same way lately. Knowing how to cook beans from scratch in your own home is a really good skill to have. Beans are a really important thing to eat as a vegan because they contain the amino acid lysine. It's found in a few plant foods, but it's especially found in beans. So beans are important to eat, and they're a lot more friendly to the animals, obviously, and way better for the environment than eating meat and eating animals. If you always have delicious beans on hand, it makes living an ethical, vegan, healthy lifestyle a lot easier. So let's get into it. Now, a word about beans and gas, because whenever someone brings up beans, you immediately think of that little nursery rhyme, right? Make sure to soak your beans when you are cooking them from scratch. It will make them a lot more digestible and make you a lot less gassy. Always make sure to rinse your beans after you cook them. And the reason most people get gas from beans is because their gut flora, their gut microbiome hasn't caught up yet to have an abundance of the type of bacteria in your gut that feeds off of plant fibers. So a way to build up that healthy gut microbiome is to just have like a spoonful of beans a day. You don't want to shock your system one day to the next. Eventually you'll build up that gut flora and you'll become a lot less gassy. So don't be afraid of beans making you fart. Just give it time. And rinse your beans. So you always want to make sure when you first start out with your beans is to just sift through them and make sure there's no pebbles or stones or any wonky looking old beans that look discolored and dried out. And then you want to make sure that you rinse them off because they will have a little bit of dust from the harvesting process. There's a lot of benefits to soaking your beans. Number one, it makes them cook a lot faster. Number two, it makes them cook more evenly. Number three, it makes them more digestible, makes you less gassy, less bloated. And number four, the longer you soak, the less phytic acid that is going to be found in your beans. So phytic acid can prevent you from absorbing the minerals that's in beans, number one. And number two, sometimes phytic acid clings onto minerals in your body and can leach your body of certain minerals. Now, a side note on phytic acid, it's totally okay if once in a while you don't want to soak your beans and you eat some phytates. Now, phytates aren't all bad for you because they've actually been shown to be anti-cancerous. Make sure to soak your beans for at least 8 to 12 hours. And this is what they look like after you soak them for about 8 hours. Now, if you don't have a lot of time, this is how to quick soak your beans. So you want to cover your beans in water, bring it up to a boil, let it boil for just 2 minutes. And then you want to turn the heat off immediately and push the beans onto a cool area in the oven and just let them sit for 1 hour. So if you forget to soak your beans the night before, then you can always do a quick soak method. But I always recommend you do some sort of soaking. Now again, if you want to prevent bloating and gassiness, make sure to rinse your beans after you soak them. Alright, now cooking beans in the Instant Pot is my absolute favorite way to cook beans. It's so easy, and I completely understand that it can be very intimidating in the beginning to use an Instant Pot, and sometimes it scares people away from it. But please don't be afraid of the Instant Pot. It's such a handy tool to have in the kitchen, especially for cooking beans. So all you really need to do is make sure that that sealant ring is in place. Now, if you pre-soaked your beans, you just need enough water to just cover the beans maybe like an inch or two. And if you want your beans to taste damn tasty, I know I sure do. I don't like eating bland food. You can always just keep it simple and just use a little salt and water and just go from there if you don't have many things on hand. But if you want to take your beans to the next level, this is how to flavor them. These flavoring ideas come from the lovely Lilikoi Hawaii. I'll link that video below. So you just use an onion, and just like making veggie stock, you can use some veggie scraps. So I used the top of a carrot and the end of a celery stalk that was starting to go bad. And then just a few cloves of garlic in there. And then the lovely bay leaf and a little bit of salt in there. Now with the Instant Pot, you don't need a ton of salt. And let's just talk for a minute about salting your beans, because there is so many different opinions out there on whether or not you should salt your beans. So the idea is that salting your beans too early makes your beans too tough and it takes them a lot longer to cook. Some people have since messed around with that and found that that's not necessarily true or necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes adding salt to your beans will prevent them from bursting out when you cook them for a long time on the stove. So some people like that and they prefer that. Other people wait until the end of season. What I've found best is two different things. On the stovetop, you want to wait until about 40 minutes into the cooking after the beans have softened a little bit, and then you add your salt in there. But in the Instant Pot, it doesn't matter because the Instant Pot is so powerful, it's going to soften your beans anyway. So don't be afraid to use a little salt with your beans in the Instant Pot. It will definitely infuse them with a lot more flavor. But also don't be afraid to mess around in the kitchen and experiment for yourself. Now, your beans are gonna taste amazing just with those first initial aromatics, but if you wanna keep this going even more and make these beans taste even more delicious, then you're gonna wanna add these to your pot. So you wanna add some coriander, some garlic powder, some onion powder, some cumin, and some smoked paprika. So I have a blog post linked below that will give you a lot more information if you want to go do a deep dive in how to cook beans. You can check that out below. I also included in that blog post some flavoring ideas you can mess around with. So go check that out. So I always refer to the Instant Pot website for the cooking times for my beans. I always look up the soaked cooking time of the bean that I am cooking. So since I'm doing black beans, I like to let them go for about 6 minutes. And then I let it slow release. This gives it time to just soften up a little bit more, and it also prevents the foam from spilling out of the pressure release valve. Look how delicious these turn out to be. So good. Now to make sure that your beans are done, you want to make sure that they're not falling apart, but that when you squeeze them, they just kind of, they soften up in between your fingers. And then just take out all your little veggie scraps and you're good to go. Now I'm making red beans on the stovetop, and I'm referring to my New Orleans style red beans recipe, and I will link this recipe below. But basically it's just onion, celery, bell pepper, a bay leaf, some smoked paprika, and a veggie bouillon cube. And then I just kind of mix that all together. That's the smoked paprika there. And then you want to bring it up to a boil, but you don't want to boil your beans because that will make them split open and fall apart. You just want to bring it up to a boil and then immediately turn it down to a medium-low simmer. And I like to partially cover the beans with a lid to make sure that, just to help them cook a little faster. Now, like I was saying before, I like to add salt kind of 40 minutes into the cooking process on the stovetop after the beans have gotten a little soft. And this is the finished product. These are so good. I just finish it off with a little hot sauce and liquid smoke. And again, I'm just checking to make sure that the beans are nice and tender, but not falling apart. All right, so there's a few different ways that you can soak your beans, but the number one thing is to make sure that they have cooled completely in their cooking liquid. So I'm going to freeze some of these beans as well as store some of these in the fridge. So right now I'm just throwing some in a reusable, freezer-friendly bag. And sometimes I also put them in little glass mason jars. If you do put them in glass mason jars, make sure that you don't fill them up way too much with liquid, because the liquid might expand and break the glass. So you don't want to fill them up completely. You want to make sure there's still a little room at the top. Beans will last in the freezer for about 3 to 6 months. And whenever you are ready to use them, just take them out the night before and put them in the fridge, or you can run them under some warm water to help thaw them a little bit quicker. So beans will last about 5 to 6 days in the fridge. So you want to make sure that you use your beans pretty quickly if you have them stored in the fridge. That's why it's a good idea to put the majority of your beans in the freezer. So please make sure to check my blog post below. It has a lot more information in there for you if this was a lot to kind of digest. I also go into detail about if your beans are not softening, why that may be in the blog post and how to remedy that. So please check out that blog post. And if you have any questions about how to cook beans, please let me know in the comments below. and I can't wait to see you all in the next video. Thanks a lot. Bye.